I have divided this video into two main chapters. Chapter 1, Carving Safety, and Chapter 2, Sharpening Your Knife. In other words, Chapter 1 is really about how to look after yourself when you're carving, whereas Chapter 2 is about how to look after your knife. So, Chapter 1, Carving Safety. Let's start by looking at knife holds. There are two knife holds that I use in these tutorials. Number 1, the whittling hold. When using the whittling hold, use your index finger as an anchor and brace the back of the blade with your thumb. For example, here I am carving the hare's body using the whittling hold. Safety tip number 1. When using the whittling hold, make sure that the piece feels stable. For example, you can brace the piece against your body. This should give you more stability for safer carving. Hold the piece in a way that feels natural to you. I always use the whittling hold like this when I'm off camera, but for clarity, I like to use a plain background for these tutorials. Safety tip number 2. When using the whittling hold, keep the direction of carving away from your body, particularly if you're holding the piece close to your chest. You can wear a leather apron for extra protection if you want to. I rarely whittle towards myself as it doesn't feel safe. Here's one brief exception to that rule, for carving a very small area. Safety tip number 3. Make yourself a leather finger guard or something similar to protect your index finger on your carving hand. It helps if it's flexible, so you don't feel restricted by it. This is particularly important when carving the small pieces in the hare kit. The whittling hold gives you lots of control over the knife, so you are very unlikely to cut your index finger. But sometimes, if I'm not wearing a finger guard, I can end up with lots of little shallow grazes on my index finger, a bit like paper cuts. These are not serious, but they can sting a little, so a finger guard prevents this from happening. Knife hold number 2, the scoring hold. Here's an example of the scoring hold from a previous tutorial. As the name suggests, I mainly use the scoring hold for scoring in lines. It's a bit like holding a pencil. Safety tip numbers 4 and 5. Don't put too much pressure on the blade, in case it slips. And always keep your spare hand away from the direction of scoring. Here's another example of the scoring hold from the hare tutorials. Notice that this video has been sped up. Safety tip number 6. When using the scoring hold, support the piece on a tabletop, not against your body like with the whittling hold. Here's one last safety tip before we move on to Chapter 2. Have a first aid kit nearby when you're carving. Here's some ideas of what it should contain. Chapter 2, Sharpening Your Knife. This chapter will show you how to strop your knife and how to look after it. To keep your knife sharp whilst carving, strop both sides of the blade every 20 minutes. Start by dressing the strop with compound. Then, place your knife on the strop and drag it down the length of the strop as shown. Repeat this stroke about 20 times. That's 1 stroke for every 1 minute of carving. Here's an important tip. When stropping, the bevel of the blade must be flush with the surface of the strop. There shouldn't be a gap between the edge of the blade and the surface of the strop. After stropping, the surface of your strop may look shiny. This is where tiny particles of metal have rubbed off onto the surface. Now strop the other edge of the knife. You can redress the strop or flip it around. Again, repeat the stroke about 20 times. My strop is double-sided, so to finish, I strop my knife using the undress side as well. This adds an extra level of polish to the blade. To finish, here are some quick tips on knife and chisel care. Do store your tools in an oily cloth to keep them from rusting. Do strop your tools every 20 minutes. That's 20 strokes for every 20 minutes of carving. Avoid using metal clamps or vices. If your tool hits into metal, it'll dent the carving edge. Avoid sanding, then returning to carving. The grit from the sandpaper will lodge in the surface of your piece and then dent the carving edge of your tools. Leave all sanding till after you've finished carving, if possible. Or you can remove particles of sandpaper with a coarse brush, like a toothbrush. This concludes safe tool handling and sharpening.